In December 1971, an article in Le Figaro announces Gainsbourg has reached his cherry season, the middle of life's journey. Serge Gainsbourg, then 43, is as ripe as a morello cherry in the sun. He sings, a derisive cockerel. He is, it continues, the epitome of a commercial artist. He sprinkles his lyrics with brand names, with Guerlain perfume and advertisements for aperitifs. Gainsbourg is not handsome, to say the least, but he has done what should be done in such a case, elevate ugliness to an art form, a difficult undertaking that he has mastered as he will master many others, with ease. The writer errs in one respect. Nothing had been easy. The whole endeavour might have capsized if Gainsbourg hadn't met Jane Birkin in May 1968. Pierre Gramblin, filmmaker and publicist, the man with a dazzling smile. It was thanks to him that happiness arrived. Jane and Serge fell in love during the shooting of his film Slogan. He was, for them, the master of happenstance. He opened up the horizon of possibilities and remained proud of this until his death at 93. Without him, Jane would never have reinvented the French language, nor inspired such masterpieces as the song Les Dessous Chic, chic underwear. Without doubt she would have done something else, but nothing would have ever been the same. Without this man, no Serge, no Charlotte, no Lou. Jane knows this well. Slogan gave the girl the time that was needed to seduce the love of her life. These two men, Serge and Pierre, chose her. They didn't reject the naive teenager, ingenuous certainly, but also a touch arrogant. Her trainers, her flared jeans, the army jacket she still wears, her knitted roll necks have established the Jane B style. The headstrong Englishwoman who wore those little Saint Laurent dresses so well. She's given an awful, awful lot to Serge Gainsbourg. The reverse was also true, but most important of all, he would never have attained rock star status without her. Jane Birkin can irritate with her excessive humility. In fact, she is serene. She knows exactly what she has given to Serge, but won't brag about it now. But how and why did Jane and Serge, separated by a generation as well as the English Channel, come to meet? Let's go back to the end of winter in 1968. An unusual spring is in the air. Serge Gainsbourg is wearing a purple shirt. He is sulking. His ego has taken a knock. For Slogan, he was going to be playing opposite the exquisite American model Marisa Berenson, but Pierre Gramblin prefers an unknown young Englishwoman who he wants to introduce to him. Gainsbourg broods. This new partner does not measure up to his stature as poet and polygamous seducer. He is furious, a mess. Brigitte Bardot has dumped him. At his newly acquired house in the Rue de Vernier, he has the walls painted black, the colour of mourning. After 86 days of passion, with the fairest of them all, she ditched the lover and kept the husband. Inconsolable, Gainsbourg displays life-size photos of her, showing her by turns lascivious, a sex bomb, a model of physical perfection. In this disheartened state of mind, Serge, 40 years of age, receives the little English girl, who is 21. She's not aware at the time of his talents. She thinks his name is Serge Bourguignon. The only thing she knows of French culture is the eponymous beef dish. Jane Birkin already has her own style. The college girl fringe, the slender body. She wears little pop art outfits, very tailored frilly silk blouses, and no bra. Her smile reveals a charming gap between the front teeth. Aristocratic, elegant, she exudes an explosive sensitivity. It is from London, of course, that Pierre Gramblin brings us Jane Birkin. He presents the miniskirt-wearing Englishwoman to a perfect specimen of French history, a singer of immigrant parentage, a Russian Jew, ambivalent in his tastes. The romance blossoms at a peculiar time, a crossroads between the old and the new. The teenagers bring in the ubiquitous wearing of jeans, trainers, and white T-shirts a la James Dean. The boys grow their hair long, the girls wear jackets, large belts, they snub the creeps and ride motorbikes. Jane Birkin has discovered this side of France at the age of 17, in 1963. A French education is part of the upbringing of British upper-class youth. The Birkin parents send their daughter to Paris to learn the language of Molière. The endeavour isn't a great success. "I was," she says, "bad spelling. I wrote everything backwards. I was useless at English, useless at French. They kicked me out of school." Jane is a girl from a good family. She ticks all the boxes. For her débutante's education, as far as aristocratic balls go, she needs to learn 2 or 3 things that will get her married, and since her French doesn't amount to much, Jane learns how to make chocolate truffles, an asset. In Paris, the well-to-do English girls stay with the Countess Puget at 67B Boulevard Lannes. There were those we were allowed to go out with as long as they were princes and we went to Maxime's. I had 2 sweet boyfriends myself, one French and an English actor. These 2 were allowed to take me out in the afternoon. We went punting in the Bois de Boulogne, and that was that. There's a lady living on the ground floor at Boulevard Lannes who the young Englishwoman does not know, Edith Piaf. At her death, Jane notices a crowd gathering outside. No doubt Serge Gainsbourg, like other artists, comes to pay homage to the Kid Piaf before her coffin. But Jane knows nothing of this world. In her personal diary, she makes the observation that the wind on those days lifts her skirt, revealing her suspender belt, which annoys her. In 1965, the French girls of the elegant 16th arrondissement scoffed at badly dressed English girls. They, on the other hand, they were brushed like racehorses, with shiny hair held by a velvet ribbon. They wore earrings and matching necklaces of false pearls, maybe real ones. Like the Hermès bag that went so well with the little burgundy twin set, the midi tartan skirts, chain loafers, they were all the same. But the badly dressed instigate a rebellion. They had their revenge with the arrival of stick-thin models like Twiggy and of swinging London. The adolescent androgynous nymphets took to bargain basement fashion, dethroning classy Dior-clad 30-year-olds hands down. Style is now British, or it's nothing. The synopsis of Slogan is simple. Serge Fabergé, a director of advertising films about to be given an award in Venice, whose wife is pregnant, falls passionately in love with the young Eveline, an uninhibited Englishwoman. For the female role, Gramblin is looking for a wild child. I look in Paris, nothing. In Rome, nothing. In Madrid, nothing. In Munich, nothing. He organises a casting at some studios in Chelsea. Burt Bacharach's music was fashionable at the time. We got the girls to enter to the tune of I'll Never Fall in Love Again. The morning is fruitless, and Gramblin has to go back to Paris in the evening. They break for lunch at Alvaro's on the King's Road, and there I see a dishevelled girl who was eating with her friend. Stunning. Through the waiter, I send her a little message to invite her to the casting. She responds, "I'm busy at 4 o'clock." And that's when I know it's her. Her name is Jane. She's full of herself. She has the unself-consciousness of youth without being altogether carefree. Divorced from a famous man, the composer John Barry, although Gramblin doesn't know it, she has a baby. She's accepted an acting role in French when she spoke it so badly. He chose her for her beauty, but also her facetiousness. She had these impossibly bent legs, and before her screen test, I snarl at her, "Do you really have to show off legs like that?" She answers, "No, I can get them straightened out if you pay for the operation." Gramblin likes beginners, docile instruments. Jane had made a 2-minute appearance in Antonioni's Blow Up, where she and a little friend romp about in rolls of paper for a photo shoot. He is being a bit simplistic. Blow Up, a beautiful Antonioni picture, is Jane Birkin's big break. Critiques of the film point out that it features the first appearance of pubic hair in a Western film that is not classified as pornographic. The Italian director has noticed that London was being swept by a new wind. In effect, there is a class revolution underway in England. Accents from the whole country are now in fashion, obliging even the rigorous BBC to pipe down a bit. Jane says, I was in love with the voice of John Barry, who was from the north. The fashion photographers were Cockneys. There was a mix of everything. A certain arrogance came with this revolution that we hadn't had before. The conceit of thinking one knew what was what. Jane fits in with the creatures of swinging London. This sparkling London, the models Twiggy and Jean Shrimpton, photographer David Bailey, the rockers, the Who, the Kinks, the Rolling Stones. London inspires a youth that is immersed in pacifist movements and professes sexual liberation. They borrow the slogan "Free Love" from the Austrian psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich. They get naked and try drugs. Sex and morality no longer mix. Being modern means sleeping around. With her new car in mind, a Mini Cooper, Mary Quant invents the accessory of this liberation, the miniskirt. The daughter of Welsh miners, she has benefited from the recent introduction of free art schools. In 1955, she opened a shop on the King's Road. In 1964, the Daily Mail publishes a picture of some 50 women to watch out for, among them Nico, Marianne Faithfull, and Jane Birkin. When she meets Serge Gainsbourg, Birkin is quite lost, just coming out of her disastrous marriage with John Barry. When Serge Gainsbourg finds out that she was married to John Barry, he is impressed because the composer is enjoying international success. Who was John Barry, the man with 5 Oscars? Born in 1933, he rearranges the Bond theme before setting a further 11 episodes of the James Bond saga to music, including From Russia with Love and Goldfinger. He goes on to ink the scores for such major films as Out of Africa, Dances with Wolves, Midnight Cowboy, and the animated film Madagascar. In the eyes of Gainsbourg, who dreams of film scores and great orchestras, John Barry is a master. When Jane Birkin falls in love with Barry, she is underage. She is 17 and he 30. Who cared back then? She is fragile. She is pampered, but is sent off to a strict boarding school, where if you did anything wrong, you felt like you were wrecking England. She is anxious not to disappoint and keen to impress. She's also free. John Barry falls for her. He's coming out of a divorce. The adolescent is flattered to be chosen over so many others by such a sophisticated and talented man. A romance ensues, and they set sail in his white Jaguar, an E-Type. But they settle into a conventional and unsatisfactory life. She makes sure the scrambled eggs aren't overcooked, sleeps with eyeliner under her pillow since he's pointed out that she has small eyes. She wears braces. He mutters that he gets the impression he's sleeping next to a racehorse. She takes this abuse, and her self-esteem crumbles. She is pregnant. He is fickle. Kate Barry is born in 1967. Her father is too busy to dwell on this. He's just received 2 Oscars for Born Free. Jane is disenchanted. When he marries his young lover, Jane Sidney, Jane Birkin is shattered, but follows her own shining path. Everything got off to a bad start. The likelihood of a real encounter between Gainsbourg, irritable, and Jane, angelic, is pretty much 0. Once signed up by Gramblin for his film slogan, Jane struggled to get to Paris. May 68 is in full swing. The planes no longer take off. When the general strike is over and the streets have calmed down, Gainsbourg, who cares about as much for student revolts as he does for his first Gitane, finally bestows some polite attention on the newly arrived young Englishwoman. She was no Lady Chatterley, no more than a Blanche Dubois from A Streetcar Named Desire. She inspired no desire in me, none at all, he said. He listens endlessly to Je t'aime moi non plus, a song in the shape of a declaration written for Brigitte Bardot, of which they've recorded an unpublished, smoky, erotic and intense version. Beauty is a trophy, and Gainsbourg is devastated by the loss of his star of Saint-Tropez. Following their breakup, he has been in a filthy mood. He was surrounded by his posters of Bardot. I didn't know where to go. I said to myself, who on earth is this poseur? Poseur, deformed and possibly sadistic. Jane is ashen-faced. She hates him. His parents have cooked a Russian dinner. They think she is charming. She finds them friendly. At the beginning of the 60s, Gainsbourg seems somewhat dated to the fans of Chuck Berry. Doll of Wax, Doll of Sound brings him success, winning the Eurovision Song Contest in 1965. In 1967, he is approaching 40. He is quite old school, made rich by his copyrights to his yeah-yeah songs. The teenagers have finally accepted him. He poses with them as Doyen. He wears Carville boots and tapering black suits. He has short hair and the gift of the gab. He is the hedonistic, misogynistic type. His passion for Bardot is the exception to the rule. I'm not a singer, Gainsbourg quips in an interview, but an artist, sceptical, lucid, and cold. I'm a sponge that doesn't release its water. I'm not generous. In your songs, the interviewer insists, the woman is absent. She is leaving or already gone. Gainsbourg, that's normal. That's an act. Problems with women are complex. My life has been punctuated by ruptures and failures. Jane, on the other hand, has no particular ambition after her failed marriage to John Barry, but maybe she dreams deep down of a sublime love. And that's just as well. Gainsbourg is a ripe fruit, and she will pick it. How will Birkin and Gainsbourg go about finding common ground? A bit old-fashioned, he takes a nuanced position when it comes to the miniskirt that Jane wears like a banner. As a voyeur and an aesthete, he has nothing against the object as such, but he also exposes himself as a conservative. He says, the woman of 1967-68 has a problem. In 1930, they had modesty in public, and now the miniskirts hardly cover half their thighs. When they enter a taxi, they ride up to the waist, and that... A young girl in a get-up like that cannot be as rigorous as she ought to be at that age. I have a charming little daughter, and I think, for her, that this era is dangerous, this liberty. Serge has an eye on England. He has listened to the Beatles and understood that a global movement was born in Liverpool. He wants to be in. He wants to be pop. Jane turns up at just the right time. Gainsbourg's cold blood is set racing by the young Englishwoman who studies him with intense, attentive eyes, who dances with him, the shy one. In 1968, Gainsbourg has crossed the frontier. He's on the spot in London. Coming from there gave me some value in his eyes, says Jane with a wry chuckle. He develops an awareness of all things British. Moreover, Gainsbourg will soon offer the bewitched Jane 69 années érotiques, 69, the erotic year. One of Gainsbourg's most beautiful songs in both substance and form. It's obvious that the spark of their encounter is immediately ignited by this song. For the moment, though, the alchemy hasn't yet worked its magic. The parachute of slogan starts in June. Jane Birkin and her daughter Kate stay at the Hotel Esmeralda with a view of Notre Dame. She meets her brother Andrew there by chance. He has worked on Stanley Kubrick's 2001 A Space Odyssey, and the American director who intends to make a film about Napoleon has asked him to do some scouting in Paris. She complains to him. The first evening, she tells me, this guy's ghastly. He is so selfish. He treats me like shit. The second, it was even worse today. I'm really upset. The third, she was so emphatic that I said to myself, I smell a rat. Gainsbourg wrecks the screen tests. Gramblin fights back. He consoles Jane, who has come to cry on his shoulder, because Serge has paid her no attention. Gramblin repeats, she's the one. The very first days of a shoot that's scheduled to go on for another 7 weeks turns sour, but here we see the first glimmers of the miracle of love. Exasperated, Gainsbourg harasses her, but how can you accept a role in France when you don't speak a word of French? And at that, she started to weep. When we get to see the rushes, I say to Gramblin, not bad, the little English girl. There is a chink in Gainsbourg's armour. He can spot a tragedian when he sees one. The troubled young girl mixes everything up, life, reality, the script. She declares in a shattered voice, "I have nothing left. I have lost everything. Not even the wild animals will want my flesh." And Gainsbourg finds her fabulous. Is making women cry what it takes to get attached to them? Gambler comes up with a ploy. He invites the two actors to dine at Maxime's to clear the air. "And I didn't join them, obviously," he says, with a malicious smile. After dinner, Gainsbourg, charmed and charming, takes Jane to New Jimmy's, the place run by a friend who had nurtured his clandestine trysts with Brigitte Bardot. Gainsbourg shows off. He asks her to dance, but only slow dances. When he steps on her feet, Jane figures out that he can't dance. Does she reject him? No. She is absolutely delighted and falls in love with his shyness, his clumsiness. She instinctively knows where the vulnerabilities are hidden. Gainsbourg takes her out to paint the town red, his town. Accomplices from now on, they take refuge at Rasputin's, a Russian nightclub, then in Pigalle, at the cabaret club, Madame Arthur's. Great moments, Jane tells me, with all these men dressed up as women who came to sit on our knees like scampering little cockerels. They all knew each other. "Hi, Sergio," they shouted, sending him kisses while putting feathers in my hair. Thrown into this universe, Jane ventures a question. Why he hadn't asked, "How are you?" when we first met, and he answered, "Because I didn't care." The armor melts. So does Jane's. It thrills her. I realized that all the things I had taken for aggressions were nothing more than protection, after all, for someone infinitely too sensitive, someone terribly romantic, with a tenderness and sentimentality one would never guess at. One day he said he was a pretend villain. And that's true. She is as besotted with him as he is taken with her. The night ends in a hotel room at the Hilton. Once the ice is broken, Serge embarks on Jane's education à la Gainsbourg. During these first steps, there is an abundance of romantic anecdotes. Serge announces to Jane that he has asked for all the landmarks of Paris to be illuminated at 8 p.m. as a manifestation of his love. They are lit up, and she believes it. He whispers, "Before I knew you, I drew you." To begin with, Jane Birkin is dressing the wounds of a young woman abandoned by her inadequate husband, as well as those of her new lover, shattered by Brigitte Bardot. It was all about affection. In 1 year he was able to heal the wound. I also did it. He found himself ugly, I found him handsome. We patched each other up. Serge has replaced his French injuries with a swinging London where he loves the sounds, the shadows and the colours. He knows that this is where tomorrow's music is being created. As for Jane, she shows imagination by remodelling her girly made-in-Carnaby Street look into Parisian chic. Slogan is released in July 1969. In order to launch his film, Gambler hires a press attaché, Bertrand Tavernier. The future filmmaker produces the marketing slogan, "Now in cinemas, the couple of the year." During the opening night at the Colisée Cinema, our two lovebirds are inseparable. Serge is in a coat and striped trousers, English style. She wears an ultra-short black mini-dress, completely see-through, revealing her thighs, her underpants, her navel and her breasts. Since she's not wearing a bra, she'll fib it was made transparent by the flashes. She has Serge on one arm and her woven wicker basket on the other. With her fringe and her flat chest, the criteria she establishes are a far cry from those of the pin-up. Between the beginning of filming and the release of Slogan, a year has passed. During that time, they have publicly become a couple, and one that has already achieved iconic status. They appear on television, in the papers, photographed happy, cheerfully running on country lanes. Jane and Serge have already created a way of life. They represent a hope for happiness. Public entertainer is a profession like no other. In order to succeed, one has to create one's own legend. Gainsbourg is well aware of this. He doesn't attend the parties of the jet set, but soon settles in with his companion Jane to the grand circle of Parisian life, chez Régine or Castel, with the masters of the era's television, Mariety and Gilbert Carpentier. Gainsbourg makes every possible effort to keep his place in the kingdom of Les Beautiful. Considerate, Birkin kept quiet. But in 2017, she adorns the sleeve of her album, Symphonic Gainsbourg, with the photograph of a simple delight, the happy couple running hand in hand along a Normandy road. Saint-Tropez thus embodies everything Jane and Serge were not. Amazing pictures of Mick Jagger and Bianca Perez Morena's wedding in 1971. Nathalie Delon and Keith Richards are their witnesses. A horde of photographers surrounds the soon-to-be-married couple's Rolls-Royce. The mayor is out of his depth. Then there's a small reception at the Café des Arts at the Port with McCartney, Ringo Starr, Eric Clapton, Stephen Stills. At the Byblos, where the bride and groom have their suite, the party continues for 3 days and 3 nights. Caviar, Coke, champagne. Gainsbourg had wanted the life of a star, but not of this kind. A life in the limelight, but with a certain Slav restraint, with respect for the dead. Without doubt, the Birkin-Gainsbourg couple has invented a unique style. Dazzling, abusive, but so very authentic. Of themselves, Jane and Serge would never have given up more than they wanted. Birkin was never spotted going topless. Gainsbourg's intimacy was never photographed without his consent. Their daughter Charlotte never let a paparazzo penetrate the mystery of her chronic shyness. Their image was controlled throughout, including in its trashiest or most inebriated instances. I gave him a family, mulls Jane today. There's no doubt I liked that more than he did. This role is very important to her. The liaison between Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg, a delightful alliance between a French-educated Russian and an Englishwoman, which makes a kind of Bloody Mary with plenty of vodka in Gainsbourg parlance. Jane's brother Andrew photographed the family's fun and games at their house in Normandy and in Paris. Children's games, cuddling the dog, jokes and hoaxes. That's where I find the real Serge, a man who loved his family, a charming and kind man. The Australian singer and fan Mick Harvey, who co-founded the Bad Seeds with Nick Cave, points out. Harvey has dedicated 2 albums, Intoxicated Man and Delirium Tremens, to Gainsbourg. Serge and Jane is the successful marriage of 2 tribes. It results in a reconstituted family, with Jane as head of the clan. Kate, daughter of John Barry, born in 1967, died in 2013, who loves Gainsbourg like a father and lugs around terrible despair. Charlotte, daughter of Serge, born in 1971, a tomboy who became a woman of exemplary discretion concerning her private life. 2 families caught up in the upheavals of history, 2 families of artists united. The Ginsbergs are uprooted. Wars and pogroms, lost or burned archives deprived them of evidence supporting their identity. Their father, Joseph, a pianist, was apparently born in the Ukraine in 1896. Olga in Feodosia in Crimea. The paternal grandfather, a teacher, is thought to have left the Ukraine in 1904 for Belarus, then England, to escape the Russo-Japanese War. We then find Joseph studying the piano at the Conservatory of Feodosia, where he meets Olga Bessman, an opera singer, mezzo-soprano, and perhaps nurse. They get married at the synagogue in 1918, the year of the assassination of Tsar Nicholas II. In order to escape being drafted into General Wrangel's White Army, the couple flees. They cross the dangerous Black Sea, reach Istanbul, pass themselves off as Turks. He teaches classical music and becomes a bar pianist. Olga and Joseph arrive in Paris in 1921. Their names are false, and so are their papers. Everything becomes provisional. How to untangle such a troubled family saga? Even the name Ginsberg is questionable. The family remains very Russian. The mother sings gypsy songs and fights with her husband in Russian, sometimes in very crude language, relates Elizabeth Levitsky, Serge's first wife. The family is not religious, but has held on to some Hebrew rituals, such as circumcision. They celebrate Easter with a stuffed carp, never eat cheese and ham from the same plate, but don't go to synagogue. The Birkin family tree is as neat as Serge's is blurred. This doesn't preclude eccentricities or outright madness. Jane's mother is the famous English actress Judy Campbell. Her beloved father David, a former commander in the Royal Navy, was in charge of retrieving English airmen and resistance fighters from the coast of Brittany during the Second World War. For Serge, who had been forced to run away and hide in the Limousin because he was Jewish, my father was a liberator, Jane relates. He had also seduced my mother, who was very beautiful, with her black hair. She used to pick us up from school, my sister and me, in her mauve convertible. Serge found all that exotic. I expected his parents not to like me because I wasn't Jewish, but there was none of that. Jane loves the family. The Ginsbergs are welcoming. The person I saw every Sunday, because she lived with Serge's parents, was Jacqueline. She was more a part of my life than Liliane, Serge's twin sister, who lived in Morocco. The two sisters are terrifying at Scrabble. They are funny and clever. Jane Birkin feels ignorant vis-à-vis this family of superbrains. They are well versed in literature, in music, in painting. They were educated to respect the arts. And then she laughs, remembering the painting Serge gave her early in their relationship. He gave me one half of a painting he'd broken over his wife's head. Of his daughter Charlotte, Gainsbourg said that she was a cocktail made of Ruski and British blood. The Ginsberg family spoke of the German occupation as if it were an adventure, a game where one had to escape the Germans in order to avoid disaster. Serge was very anti-religious, but wearing the yellow star during the war had profoundly marked him. He gave his daughter a Star of David he had inherited from his mother, Olga. Gainsbourg has been fascinated by aristocrats for a long time. He has already married 2 of them. In this saga, the Birkins find their place logically and naturally. David is aristocratic through his mother, who is related to the Dukes of Bedford, and military through his father, a hussar in the British Army. Jane's mother, Judy Campbell, is the daughter of an actress and of a playwright. She goes on stage at London's Comedy Theatre to appear in a musical, New Faces. Hired for a Dorothy Parker monologue, she is asked to sing A Nightingale Sang in Berkeley Square. Her voice that reverberates under the German bombs makes an impression. Noel Coward hears her sing. Judy Campbell becomes his fetish actress. A star posture, dark glasses. She marries David in 1943. They have 3 children. Jane and her sister are sent to a private school on the Isle of Wight, the Penal Colony. That's where they experience nostalgia, doom and gloom. When Jane and Gainsbourg's paths cross, her parents, who love France, are thrilled. Serge, she observes, loves her father David in a Jewish-Russian way. With the Birkins, Serge Gainsbourg finds the peace he had been deprived of by the rigour and severity of his violently choleric father. Prematurely exposed to need as a child, he has cultivated the art of being a contrarian. His father wanted him to be a concert musician. He became a painter. Joseph considered chanson to be a minor art form. Serge became a singer. Every Christmas, the family disembarks at Victoria Station. Serge brings his favourite turkey stuffed with truffles. The parents-in-law pick at it discreetly, thinking that it's rotten. By now a cult in France, the couple are unknown in England, and everything went very well for Serge for a week. Then he started to worry. He had to go back to Paris in order to be loved once more, and to recommence the habitual round of clubs, restaurants and mischief. In 1975, Gainsbourg wrote Rock Around the Bunker, an entire album dealing with the devastations of Nazism and the dangers of totalitarianism. Later on, an unpublished work is found, The Silence of the Pope, which denounces the anti-Semitism of Pius XII. At the time, Serge remarked, "Oh, I said to myself that there was no point in stirring up all that stuff." Gainsbourg was an atheist, but he gave money to Israel. When he released the ironic Rock Around the Bunker, the Jewish community didn't appreciate it. One couldn't talk about the Shoah in these caustic terms, Gainsbourg was often mocking. "We used to explore cemeteries a lot. It reassured us. We called it survivors' visits," Jane remembers. Gainsbourg joked, "I was born under a good star. Yellow." Out of his artistic failure, after 17 years of studying the visual arts without finding his style and a Jewish identity that he never fully accepted, he created an art of the comeback, of distance and playfulness, of political irony. The union of Birkins and Gainsbourg's changes his vocabulary. The encounter with Jane reaffirms the beauty of franglais and of anglicisms, of bang and of exit, of cool and of bathing beauty, cursed, popular, lonely, applauded, a model at times, often rejected. Serge Gainsbourg talked in interjections, neologisms, sarcasm, formulae, affirmations or imprecations and aphorisms, and each stylistic device has contributed to the hiding of its author, the psychoanalyst Michel David writes. Jane Birkin, for her part, fights for democracy, for the freedom of minorities and against imprisonment. She goes to Sarajevo, defends Aung San Suu Kyi, the Dalai Lama, and the Tibetans. She becomes an indispensable part of cultural life, works for the survival of the Théâtre du Soleil. In 1999, at the Avignon Festival, she creates Arabesque. In it, she revisits Serge Gainsbourg's repertory using Middle Eastern sounds, a way for her to fight prejudice. The family obviously has its flaws. It has a difficult heritage. Under the media spotlights, Serge and Jane had to come up with new ideas and endure. He is a peculiar father. In 2015, Charlotte Gainsbourg left it all behind for New York with her husband and her 3 children. She was brought up without any restrictions, free to hang out in nightclubs until dusk when her friends had to be home at midnight. One day, when she was 14, Daddy called the nightclub Les Bains Douches to prevent her from entering because he had heard that she had smoked a joint. She denied it. At 13, she films the sulphurous music video Lemon Incest with her father in New York. She is pathologically shy. At 9, when her parents separate, and at 14, when she receives the César for Most Promising Actress for An Impudent Girl by Claude Miller. Born in 1982 to Jane Birkin and the director Jacques Doyon, Lou has a critical view of her family, while remaining naturally kind. "My father isn't a nice man, no more than Serge was. I come from a family of troublemakers, where women had to be muses without the right to speak. It's important to understand that I come from a family that lives in the cult of Peter Pan. We all live the lives of children." Lou gives another example. The plush Monkey, who appears on the cover of the album Histoire de Melody Nelson, my mother slept with it until Serge's death, and she put it in his grave with him. My uncle freaked out. He didn't want Monkey to leave. Everything is like this with us. My mother keeps everything, our first shoes, our first teeth. There are pictures of us all as children, all over the place. We live in our childhood, amongst ghosts. With my mother, on the other hand, it's like a cult of death. With Jacques Doyon, Jane is far removed from the things she had known with Serge in the 70s, this glamorous, successful life with great financial windfalls. Lou Doyon feels like an intruder, a little mongrel who wasn't part of the Royal Gainsbourg-Birkin circle, who had no understanding whatsoever of what Charlotte had gone through. I didn't have the same mother as Kate or Charlotte. My mother didn't appear in the press. Serge was obsessed with success, with the media. Jane, in her union with Serge, with her youth, her freshness, shows the world that it is possible to transform someone with love, and nothing can make her deviate from that idea. In 1990, having been separated from him for 10 years, she still smiles at him. Serge will die a few months later. They are interviewed on television. She brings her poetry to the screen, stroking the hair of her aging man, a bloated, blabbering alcoholic. She is now at the prime of her beauty, a mature woman preparing to return to the stage. She leans against Serge's shoulder, says, "We have Charlotte," with that delicious hint of franglais and that loving, soft glance. She forgives and never judges. Gainsbourg is the picture of broken humanity we all have in us. The family is never going to be divided on Jane's account. Gainsbourg is a bruised man. He thought of himself as ugly. I found him handsome. Jane loved the B-sides of Serge's records. She had the hidden side. He was mine as a secret before he went platinum with Aux Armes, etc. in 1979. Serge made me sing 1 octave higher than my normal voice, which made me sound like a choir boy at church. And conversely, what did she give to him? Masterpieces. The first, the new version of Je t'aime, moi non plus. When he offers her the song, Jane accepts immediately. She accepts out of jealousy, she says, so that he wouldn't offer it to anyone else. After Bardot left him, Serge did the rounds of London clubs, chatting up young blondes, with the recording of a bombshell of a song thrown in. So Jane Birkin gets hold of Je t'aime, moi non plus, and the song conquers the world, precisely because it combines innocence and perversity. Serge Gainsbourg gets hold of Birkin's voice. In that environment, Jane is a revolution. "I gave my very high-pitched voice to Serge anyway," Birkin concedes. Then he started using a kind of recitative. That's because of me. I always hesitate to say so. He now thought of himself as a Russian poet with his small glasses. I loved that. Borrowed from the great tradition of French chanson réaliste, Serge Gainsbourg's recitative is reminiscent of the repetitive, rhythmical style of Jewish cantors. For Gainsbourg, Je t'aime, moi non plus is both a burden and an opportunity not to pass up. The song is recorded at London's Marble Arch studio. Each records their size in separate booths, and Gainsbourg mixes them. On returning to Paris, Jane and Serge test the water. They're staying at a hotel on the Rue des Beaux-Arts, the place in which Oscar Wilde died. At its plush restaurant, Serge plays the record as a surprise. Forks freeze in mid-air. He knows he's got a hit. When Jane plays the song to her parents, she makes sure to lift the needle from the disc at the most explicit passages. Less than a year after May 1968, the song explodes all over the place. Radio stations refuse to play it, but the outrageous slow dance is played a lot in nightclubs. "The Pope has been our best publicist," Jane said. "The Osservatore Romano, the Vatican's official publication, succeeds in stopping the Italian distribution of the song, which it considers obscene. The boss of the Italian subsidiary of Philips is taken into provisional detention. The BBC boycotts the song. Despite that, the single reaches the top of the English charts, a first for a French production." Following the furore caused by Je t'aime, moi non plus, Georges Meyerstein-Maigret, the boss of Philips, summons the couple of the year. He tells them, "Listen, chaps, I'm happy to go to prison, but for an LP, not a single." Gainsbourg now creates the album Jane Birkin, Serge Gainsbourg, which will be banned for minors and sold under cellophane. One song, Jane B., is a pastiche on a poem by Nabokov, which appears in Lolita. Serge Gainsbourg has jug ears. His mother tries an experiment with Jane, sticking them to his head with adhesive tape. The result is ugly. The triangular harmony of the face is broken. Jane has seen the videos shot with Brigitte Bardot before their encounter. She finds him exquisite. There's nothing to change. He was perfect, which was probably the result of an age that suited him much better. 40 years. He wasn't smooth. There was great beauty. The Super 8 footage brings it out very well. There still was some more to do, taking off the socks, finding slippers and jewellery. She liked neither underpants for boys nor socks, so she suggested he should wear jeans with nothing underneath. One day she goes to Repetto in Rue de la Paix. She is in search of ballet flats. They were incredibly soft men's ballet shoes. One can't walk a lot in them, but Serge didn't walk. He took taxis. There were lots of happy coincidences. After that, seeing his slender ankles was perfectly enchanting. The socks had to go in order to reveal his slender ankles. That's what I've given him, she says. Femininity. And then with his long hair he became irresistible. To this she adds the jewellery on his wrists, the diamonds, the sapphires that suited him so well and that I bought near the Rue de Rivoli, Countess diamonds. For Serge, Jane was the condition of his existence. She remembers the recording sessions for the pieces written for her after their breakup. At first, singing about the wounds one has caused seems like a terrible thing to do. Inside the recording booth, there was only one thing to do, to hit the highest notes I could, even if it meant breaking my voice, so that Serge shouldn't cry out of sadness, but for the beauty of the thing. I didn't think of it in these terms at the time. On that album, Baby Alone in Babylon, and the successive ones, Lost Song and Amour Défunte, this triptych nurtured by our breakup, Serge gave me his feminine side to sing. He kept his provocative side for himself, and explored it with his Rasta experiences and songs like The Boy, I'm the Boy Who Can Enjoy Invisibility, the only one I know that deals with homosexuality. In 1971, Serge Gainsbourg releases Histoire de Mélodie Nelson, developed in London with the composer and arranger Jean-Claude Vannier. This short rock opera sublimates a very young girl with red hair, an adorable tomboy, struck on her bike by Serge Gainsbourg's 1910 Rolls-Royce Silver Ghost. What follows is a romance and a tragedy. The man is getting on, while she is in the fresh bloom of youth. Melody isn't yet 15. Jane, who is 10 years older, adapts her voice and appearance to the role of nymphette. Jean-Claude Vannier has said that Serge had always thought of himself as an old man. It's true, he was delighted to be seen with younger women. Girl or boy didn't make that much of a difference. He pictured himself as Dirk Bogarde in Death in Venice. In the holiday movies my parents took, I really looked like a boy, and he loved my body. I didn't have Melody Nelson's age, 14 autumns and 15 summers, but I easily looked the part. The cover of the record is telling. Birkin is topless, and because she is pregnant with Charlotte, she holds a toy monkey to her stomach. On the 23rd of April 1970, at the Marble Arch studio, Serge Gainsbourg is late. Jane is worried. Then he arrives with a box. It's a Carita wig he's just bought. Short red hair. Gainsbourg is having fun. He plays, wearing the wig. He loved to masquerade as a girl. He's in love with Jane, whose appearance is androgynous. He said I was half boy, half girl, which he loved. He told me I looked like a Lucas Cranach painting, and I was very flattered. Serge's first film, Je t'aime moi non plus, is released in 1976. The subject is up to him. It's only the title that is insisted upon by the producers, with a view to capitalizing on the global success of the 1968 song. Jane, with short hair, a tank top, jeans, and a dangling belt, plays Johnny, a waitress in a roadside bar somewhere in the American desert. She is seduced by the charm of a homosexual truck driver, Crass, played by Joe D'Alessandro, an actor who is close to Andy Warhol and The Factory. He is the muse of the filmmaker Paul Morrissey, who hires him for his trilogy Flesh, Trash, Heat. And because he is the iconic sex symbol of American underground cinema, Gainsbourg wants him for his strange film. The American actor, atrociously dubbed in French, plays a brawny macho with a steely gaze. He drives a knackered, heavy tipper truck, a Mack painted in a murky yellow. Crass has a lover, the tortured introvert Padovan, played by Ugo Cuesta, who keeps fiddling with a plastic bag with murderous intentions. The two drifting men make a living by hauling rubbish, clothes, bidets, scrap metal, to the rubbish dump. Jane Birkin finds the script Shakespearean, with the trio, the jealous man. Presumably I was completely amoral. I didn't think for a second that people would be that upset, because I understood the situation perfectly. In the early 70s, anti-gay segregation is still intense, and this film does reflect its era. Shot on a private airstrip, the film centers on a prop, the bar. There is a string of cameos. Nana, the touchingly ugly bull terrier bitch adored by Serge, takes on the role of pillar of humanity in a world of misfits. There are on-set rumors that Jane is attracted to the handsome American and vice versa, and that Gainsbourg is said to be jealous. No! Jane takes exception to this. Serge was a tad in love with Joe. He was such a dream of a boy, and Ugo was perfect in his role of jealous lover. The nude scenes, which could have been a bit awkward, really weren't, because Joe was charming and not sleazy at all. It was a great team, with Willy Courant at the camera, Serge sublime, beautiful, the set photographer brilliant. The sex scenes were very acrobatic, what with cables passing under our stomachs. As this was technically complicated, I just took care that nothing should be visible. I'd put adhesive tape here and there, and when it came to editing, I had total confidence in Serge. With a few exceptions, the film was not well received. It is saved from an X rating by Michel Guy, Secretary of State for Culture in the government of Giscard d'Estaing. By the standards of the era, and let's not forget that Serge Gainsbourg always had his ear to the ground, Je t'aime moi non plus could have been indexed in the culture porn category. But Guy and Giscard d'Estaing spent the first months after coming to power in giving France an image of modernity, of liberal mores. The porn movie is taking off and becomes a genre. But at the end of 1975, as the filming is coming to an end, the government yields to pressure from family and Christian associations and introduces the X rating, crushing the porno under taxation to bring down independent production of these types of work. All this affects Serge Gainsbourg's first film. It isn't widely distributed. Jane's mother watches it in a cinema on the Champs-Élysées. She told me, "You are beautiful when you run with Nana, the dog." She was being stoic, because there were many sex scenes. Too many, in my humble opinion. The critics are implacable. Delphée de Tonne considers the film boring and sickening. Sickening, the exploitation of his wife Jane Birkin. Madame Raymond, Serge and Jane's help, washes the walls of their house every morning. They are covered in graffiti that is obscene, menacing, or that question the director's virility. The director of photography has to go back to the United States and shoot B-movies under a pseudonym. Gainsbourg finds solace in listening to François Truffaut predicting on the radio that Je t'aime moi non plus will end up in the film libraries. Jane is under attack. In England, the film is shown in a single theatre, a gay cinema. Someone heckles her. "And where did you put women's liberation?" They said that Serge had turned me into trash. But no, the shoot was great. It was funny. Serge bent over backwards. He wanted everyone to be happy. He wanted parties, and we were happy to do whatever he asked of us. But Jane, who has conquered many hearts with her laugh, her charm, her romanticism, indeed takes a risk, that of no longer making people dream. Jane and Serge, darlings of Saturday night, live in a storm of desire, a vortex of love and humiliation. Gainsbourg heads, Gainsbourg tails, Jane White, Jane Black, they are accomplices. He knows how to manipulate fantasies which will place him at the apex of nonconformist, irreverent, subversive pop culture with an allure that enrages some while delighting others. In 1971, Gainsbourg created La Décadence. He whispers. The piano-harmonium style provides the slow dance tunes. The music video is steaming. It was revolutionary, Jane explains. It was also a deplorable attempt at commercially recycling Je t'aime, moi non plus. The provocation that had helped him build his reputation becomes systematic. In 1979, he corrupts La Marseillaise. A huge scandal ensues. A group of paras disrupt his concerts. Jane takes to the pen to insult Michel Duat, a member of the French Academy, who has written that it's a profanation, pure and simple, of what is most sacred to us. The nature of the contract between Jane and Serge changes when they split up, but it lasts. Birkin mentions this song from 1987, Une chose entre autres. One thing among others that you don't know, you've had more than any other, the best of me. Yes, this really seemed true to me that I had the best of him, until his death. He says, perfect journeys don't exist. Don't worry, I've seen others. I'll get by with what I don't have. It's a personal message, and at the same time a summary of work since we no longer live together. It's unbearable to have that many personal secrets revealed, interpreted, given away. And at the same time, this was our life. Jane and Serge never got married. In 1971, they posed for a mock wedding in Hyde Park. She, long white lace dress with a wedding bouquet and a flower wreath in her hair. He, formal suit, frilly shirt cuffs and a large bow tie. These creative nuptials counted for more than the fantasy of everlasting marriage. One thing is obvious, their union is a success. In 2009, Paris Match publishes an amazing interview with Serge's first wife, Elizabeth Levitsky, who has just written an explosive book of memoirs, Lise and Lulu, 40 Years of Love. Her words are like cutlasses. I am a Russian immigrant, like Serge. We are not even 20. We fall madly in love. I am against marriage, but on the 3rd of November 1951, I end up giving in. Wrongly. Luckily, we separate on the 9th of October 1957. When we met, we swore by nothing but free love and painting, but everything goes topsy-turvy at the end of his military service. He comes back a sniper, and most of all hell-bent on marrying me. In 1951, I marry him, dressed in black. The only witnesses are the cook and an instructor from the School for Jewish Orphans who have survived the concentration camps, where he teaches. 2 days later, I walk in on him with the school's laundry maid. Having forced marriage on me, he thus made me suffer his affairs, while preventing me from having my own. On paper, our marriage lasts 6 years. In reality, it is broken as soon as it's celebrated. For Elizabeth and Serge, the marital cocktail is explosive. What women fall for, she continues, is his painter's gaze, an expression of extreme alertness. As soon as he directed it at a woman, she let herself be seduced. She was like a butterfly on a pin, and he paints her. He is very attentive. I have never known anyone as intent on giving pleasure, on having such an egalitarian relationship with a woman. No high-handed gesture, not one superfluous word, no coarseness. She can tolerate his indiscretions, but not his renunciation of painting. She is convinced until the end that he could have been a great artist. On the day of their divorce, Elizabeth confesses they come to an agreement. They swear that they will always be available for each other. 10 years after their separation, Elizabeth visits him at his studio. Our relationship is free. It is a relationship of pleasure. Each change of address is a pretext for an erotic inauguration. Over the years, my body has changed. I have grown fat and thus taboo. We share a secret, and it's delightful. When Jane Birkin leaves him, Elizabeth helps him to contain his rage and despair. For almost 40 years we have lived in post-marital adultery, as he said. The events Levitsky alludes to cannot be verified. What is not in doubt, however, is the disaster of Gainsbourg's second marriage to Beatrice Pancrazzi, Princess Galitzine. For Gainsbourg, she represents the kind of upper class that dazzles him, and that she has turned her back on. She is also terribly jealous. The first scene, caused by a phone call, occurs on their wedding day in 1964. She couldn't accept this profession. I understood immediately that this was going to turn into a nightmare. In any case, I'd been right to organize the wedding dinner at a Russian restaurant. The atmosphere it took place in was absolutely Siberian. The singer Juliette Greco says of Beatrice, "She was magnificent, but her eyes were like embers." Gainsbourg, pursued by this murderous panther, was a sight to behold. She was ready to gun everyone down. How dramatic. Mind you, I can understand that one might get jealous over such a man. And yet, 7 months after their wedding, their daughter, Natasha. Gainsbourg faces paternity and success. Groupies sleep on his doorstep. One story relates that in 1963, Serge Gainsbourg acts opposite Dalida on the set of The Stranger of Hong Kong. Convinced that he is cheating on her with Dalida, Beatrice jumps on a plane to Hong Kong, knocks on the singer's door and slaps her before going back to Paris. Serge Gainsbourg leaves Beatrice in 1966. He briefly returns to their marital home, the time it takes to conceive a son and to escape into the arms of Brigitte Bardot. Paul is born in 1968, when Serge has just met Jane. When Jane leaves him, 12 years later, he will suffer and be reborn. His worsening health and bloated face do not prevent him from seducing Bamboo, a magnificent Eurasian lioness. He drinks, she shoots smack, and he prevents her from committing suicide. They even have a child, Lucien. His erotic life cuts across his art. He makes songs in which innocence is tainted by perversion. To have them performed, he seeks sensuality in the voice. As Mireille d'Arc, who also sings for him, sums up, he wagered everything on breath, on distress, on unspoken attraction. Gainsbourg likes chic eccentrics. He is a misogynist, or claims to be, and is at the mercy of beautiful women. Juliette Greco, for example. Faced with her, he goes to pieces, knocks his coffee cup over, is speechless. He writes Once There Was a Goose, an ambiguous, derisive and feminist song for her. Greco says, he had every talent, except maybe one for happiness. I have been terrified by his shyness. It was terrible to see a man in such a state of fragility, of embarrassment and anxiety. He then wrote some very beautiful songs for me, among them La Javanaise, which took some time to find its audience. I insisted until it became, in a way, Gainsbourg's Marseillaise, famous all over the world. His songs were mostly sung by women, Juliette Greco, Françoise Hardy, Petula Clark, Zizi Jeanmaire, Vanessa Paradis. He makes them sing very close to the microphone. One can almost hear them breathe. Listen to Catherine Deneuve in God is a Smoker of Havanas, Jane Birkin says perceptively. Gainsbourg loved Billie Holiday for her flaws and couldn't stand singers with powerful voices, preferring Judy Garland, her daughter Liza Minnelli. He has never written a song for Edith Piaf. You need throaty songs, songs that come from the gut. I just play with words, he'd explain to the indomitable giant of the chanson. He loved actresses for their frailty, their lack of self-confidence. He was seeking their emotionality. When something broke, when emotions boiled over, he didn't care about the words, Birkin says. The chanson may be a minor art, but it is an amorous one, with a zest of perversion to boot. The year 1967 spawns many love affairs. A few months before the passionate affair with Bardo, there was this fragile but never-breaking beauty, this face of haunted innocence, this black voice with a Nordic accent, Anna Karina. At the time, Serge Gainsbourg was very restrained, very well-dressed, all that, Anna Karina explained later, precisely under the sun, so revolutionary. We worked at his place. He lived at a studio somewhere on the right bank with nothing but a grand piano in it. He was terribly shy, playful, very elegant, and already cynical. The atmosphere was fantastic. Gainsbourg was a perfectionist. We spoke in pig Latin, talked rubbish. We ate cheese and drank red wine. I've hardly ever had as much fun with a man as I did with Serge. I lost him because he met Bibi, then Birkin. His toy in 1969 is Jane Birkin's voice, which flows in a trickle, fragile and trembling. The marvel with Jane, he explained, consisted in her weakness. Her voice couldn't be controlled. She couldn't even pretend to control it. What she could do was to work without trying to force things against her nature. The one thing she has always been good at is expressing herself through her voice. That's why she gives the high school kids goosebumps. Each time she opens her mouth, we feel that she is defending herself against a maniac or a criminal. Jane, he continues, is the tragic actress of a choice repertoire, chosen by him. But isn't it the other way around? The macho society of the post-war years attributes genius to the man and to the woman, the work of a seamstress. Serge was everything to Jane, or almost everything. But what did she give him? What did she offer him, her masculine-feminine alter ego? What in turn did this tormented and funny man, with whom she has shared the 12 most beautiful years of his life, offer her? After his encounter with Jane Birkin, Gainsbourg wrote his most accomplished albums. She sang them with talent, dressing and undressing Serge's oeuvre. He writes marvels for her, from Jane B. to Amour défunte, which was released 9 years after their separation. Separation and death notwithstanding, Jane carries the songs of her companion in life and in art, written while they were still together or beyond their conflicts, thanks to the unfailing strength of their bond. It is a privilege that one of the greatest French songwriters has written for me from when I was 20 to when I was 45. You see, it never stopped. It's a strange situation. What can I do for him now, when it's too late? At least I can carry him, take him with me, say his words.
Je t'aime, the legendary love story of Jane Birkin and Serge Gainsbourg by Véronique Mortagne, was read by Jane Slavin, abridged by Polly Coles, and produced by Clive Brill. It was first heard in 2019, and you may have heard the news of the death of Jane Birkin earlier this month at the age of 76. The programme was a Brill production for BBC Radio. Next week, Alec Coppell's The Gazebo will be part of Radio 4 Extra's All Request weekend.
I'm Mother Courage. You've heard of me. Everyone knows me.
On Radio 4, Bertolt Brecht's classic anti-war play.
Despite the sacking, stabbing, plundering and violating